Hey everyone, it's Riley with another all-English episode. And it's the new year, so people probably have New Year's resolutions or goals that you're trying to accomplish this year. And if you're listening to this show, then maybe your goals are related to language learning, English, for example, right? Maybe you have some sort of English goal, like getting a TOEIC score, an ACAN test, or something like that. And I had that last year. Last year, I had a goal to get a score or a result on a JLPT test, which is the Japanese language proficiency test. I think is what it stands for. And this year, I don't have that much of a goal. I mean, I just generally obviously would like to improve my Japanese, but I don't have like a specific goal that I'm aiming for. But anyway, I thought that I would talk about, the difficulties of learning Japanese. I'm sure people listening to this are familiar with a lot of the difficulties of learning English. So maybe it'll be interesting to hear about the difficulties of learning Japanese. Instagrams. Mine is Riley Sullivan XD and Sota is Eigo no Sota. I still don't post very much, but go ahead and follow Sota. He posts quite a lot more than I do. Without further ado, let's get into the episode. So when you start learning Japanese, obviously the first thing that hits you is the writing system, right? They say Japanese has 3 or 4 writing systems, I guess. 4 if you include, like, Romanji, right? Like, kind of the Latin alphabet. But the main ones are, hiragana, katakana, and kanji, of course. And at first, you were learning probably hiragana. Most people learn hiragana first, and then katakana, and then kanji. And that's kind of, like, daunting. It seems like a really difficult task at first when you see, this language that you can't read at all. But I actually think, hiragana and katakana are pretty easy. It's, 50 characters each that you have to memorize. And I think it should take most people, maybe a month max to be pretty confident in hiragana and katakana. So it's not that difficult. I think if Japanese were only hiragana and katakana, it might not have the reputation for being so difficult that it does. But there's a lot of other problems with that, obviously. Like, if it was only hiragana, there'd be a lot of words that look exactly the same, and kanji solves that problem. So then, getting on to kanji. Kanji is probably the most difficult part about learning Japanese. I think most people would agree with that. At least it's the thing that takes the most time to study, right? Even if kanji isn't necessarily, hard, because a lot of it is just remembering something, right? You have to remember what this symbol means, or how to read this symbol. But it does take a lot of study time. It's definitely the thing that I've spent the most time studying in Japanese. I've tried studying kanji a lot of different ways. I've written them down in notebooks. I have a dozen notebooks full of kanji that I wrote down, trying to practice, learning how to write them. I actually don't do that anymore because I find that I very rarely write kanji. So it's maybe more effective to just try to learn the readings rather than trying to know how to write them. So every once in a while, that is embarrassing when I try to write down a kanji and I don't remember how to write it. But whatever, it doesn't happen that much, so probably it's a better use of my study time to just try to read them, right? Learn how to read them. And doing that is, there's a few different ways to do it, but probably the easiest way, the way that I do the most, is just flashcards. You just make yourself a set of flashcards with kanji and learn them. I prefer to learn kanji with vocabulary attached. Some people learn just the individual kanji, the individual symbol, and then they learn all the different readings it can have. But I think that's not that useful. It's more useful to learn kanji when it's part of a word. you know? I guess usually when there are other kanji attached to it, or if it's a verb, when there's furigana attached to it or whatever. But I think that that's more useful because then you actually like see it when you're reading something on the street or reading a book or a newspaper or whatever. You'll actually see that version of the kanji, like the word, and that'll make it easier to remember like in the long term, I think. Some people do it the other way, where they learn the basic kanji, like the individual kanji first, and that can work too. I've tried that too, but it's not how I like to do it anymore. But yeah, I mean, I guess the other difficult thing about kanji is that, like, in Chinese, right, for example, where kanji comes from, obviously, each kanji has like one reading, basically, mostly. And there's a lot more in Chinese, I think. I don't remember the numbers, but let's say Chinese has like 5,000 that you use normally, like to read a newspaper or something. And I think Japanese has 2,000 or whatever. I forget the numbers. But anyway, there's more in Chinese. But in Chinese, each one has one reading. And in Japanese, you have words like, ikiru, sei, nama, whatever. That's all the same kanji. And there's like, I don't know how many readings for that kanji, like 20 or something. It's crazy. So that's the difficult thing is where you'll remember one kanji and then you have to remember, maybe on average it's not 20 obviously, but like 3 or 4 different ways to read it, depending on if it's a verb or if it's a noun or if it's onyomi, kunyomi, all this kind of stuff, right? So yeah, that's probably the most difficult part about Japanese. But like when I first came here, when I was, started living here, I mostly just kind of spoke to people, and that's how I learned Japanese at first. I mean, I had to understand what my students were saying, because a lot of my elementary school students, they didn't speak English, and they would just be speaking to me in Japanese. And there were like Japanese staff in the classroom who could help me with that, but it was also helpful if I knew. So that's kind of my first practice listening to Japanese and speaking Japanese a bit, was listening to students, and then obviously like friends that I meet at bars or whatever, even at work, and we meet up and speak Japanese in a kind of casual way, especially at bars. Speaking Japanese in a casual way I think is actually not that hard. Like that part of the language is much easier than other languages, I would say. Like if Japanese were just a spoken language and it was always casual, it would be pretty easy, because you don't need to use the wa, ga, o, ni, all that stuff. You don't really need it that much when you're speaking casually. You don't have to worry about things that you have to worry about in other languages. Like, Japanese only really has 3 tenses, right? You have kind of present tense, which is also future tense. You have past tense, and then you have like the continuous tense, right? You can say like there's suru, shita, and shiteiru, and that's like basically it. There's like a couple more, I guess, but those are the main ones, right? Whereas in like English, for example, I guess you have more than that, right? You can say I do, I did, I'm doing, but you also have I have done or I will do. And English isn't even that bad. Other languages like Spanish have a lot more tenses that you need to be able to learn. Like tenses meaning like the verb changes, right? The verb doesn't change that much in Japanese, even in terms of like the subject, right? So if I do something but she does something, right? That changes in English. In Japanese, it doesn't really change, right? That's actually like an easy thing about Japanese, I think. Similarly, I think that, like nouns only have one form in Japanese, right? That anytime you say a word like, I don't know, every word I'm thinking of is a katakana word, burashi, or whatever, haburashi. What's an actual Japanese word? I don't know. Isu, let's say. I'm sitting in a chair, so that's why that came to mind. But like, if you have more than one, it's still the same word. Obviously, you add a number, but you still say isu. And then if it doesn't matter if it's the subject or the object. You can add o or wa, whatever, but the noun doesn't change in Japanese. Whereas in a lot of other languages, there's plurals, right? In English, you add an s. In some languages, nouns can be masculine or feminine, like in Spanish. Isu, chair, would be la silla because it's feminine, so you end it in an a. But there's other words that end in o, and then that affects how the adjective works with the noun. But in Japanese, you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. Especially casual Japanese, I think, is actually pretty easy from like a grammar standpoint. But that all changes when you get to formal Japanese, right? Like keigo is really difficult, I think. It's still something that I'm not good at all. I often hear Japanese people say like, "Oh, I'm not really that good at keigo," and something. But I mean, obviously they're much, much better at it than me. But that's where the kind of, I would say keigo is maybe the most difficult part of Japanese, meaning that even if you study it a lot, it's still easy to make mistakes, like for an English speaker, I mean, because the kind of situation, the things that are important about speaking to someone, if they're in a higher position than you, if they're your boss, you have to speak to them in this way. But if you're talking about something they are doing, then you talk in this way. But if you're talking about something you will do, then you use a different kind of form of the verb or whatever. That kind of stuff is really hard because it's completely alien to English, right? We don't really have anything like that in English grammar. So, yeah, I would say that's the hardest thing, because even if you study it, you still might get it wrong. You have to actually change the way that you think. Where compared to kanji, where it's like, okay, yeah, there's a lot of readings, but if you just memorize it, you'll be okay. Whereas with keigo, you actually have to change the way you're thinking a little bit. Yeah, and then the other kind of, this is not like a Japanese thing, this might be all languages, I think, but when I first came to Japan, I was not good at Japanese, and then I kind of quickly got to this level where I could more or less say what I needed to say in most situations, whether it's at a convenience store or, telling my students to pay attention or be quiet or whatever, like simple kind of requests or commands in the case of students, things like that. And then I kind of stuck at that level for a while. Like, I find that you reach these plateaus with language learning, or at least I do with Japanese, where once you get to a point where you kind of can do the things that you have to do in your life, it becomes easy to lose motivation to study, because, yeah, you're okay for most things. And those plateaus can be different levels, right? If you're just worried about going to the supermarket or whatever, going to restaurants, then that's a pretty low bar. It's pretty easy to get there with Japanese or any language. But if you then want to be able to talk to your friends or talk to strangers at bars and have small talk conversations, that's probably another level. But then you can get stuck in that plateau, right? Or if you want to be able to talk at work, about business-related things or work-related things, I don't know. That's probably another level. And then, but each of these things, it becomes kind of easy to just stop there. Because it's like, oh, it's okay for what I do in my everyday life, so I don't need to get much better. So that's I think one of the most difficult parts about learning any language is kind of going past that plateau, going out of the comfortable area that you found. You worked really hard to get to this spot that now is comfortable, and you're comfortable, just chatting with your friends in kind of simple conversational Japanese, or English in the listener's case, right? But then the next level beyond that takes some extra work. I think that's kind of where I am now with Japanese is I need to get to the next level. I don't really have a title for it. Maybe it's business Japanese. I mean, the level of the test I got, N2, is technically business Japanese, or like people used to say that most jobs ask for N2. But I don't feel that confident speaking Japanese at a business level or whatever. So I would say that for me, I definitely need to read more. I should probably watch TV more to get better at listening. I don't watch Japanese TV or Japanese anything very much at all, which is probably bad for my Japanese learning. Definitely something I should do more. And then, reading. I've been trying to read books more in Japanese. I'm extremely slow, so that kind of makes it annoying. I'll read a book on my lunch break, and I'll maybe get through, 8 pages in like 45 minutes, which is pretty bad, I think. But yeah, I think for now at this point, I've been in Japan almost 10 years now, and I think I should really be better at Japanese in a more kind of natural way, and that includes work, speaking formal Japanese, speaking Keigo, and also being able to like read a newspaper or things like that. So those are the things that I'm thinking about now. But that plateau where it's like I'm kind of comfortable now. I don't really need Japanese at work. Pretty much all of my coworkers speak English, and the ones that don't, I can communicate with through someone that speaks both English and Japanese, right? So I don't really need it at work. I don't need it in my daily life that much. I can get around using the amount of Japanese that I have, but I think at this point, like, I should probably go to the next level. Should work on crossing that plateau. Not sure crossing is the right word there, but anyway, getting to the next level there. So anyway, that's the difficult things I find in learning Japanese, and some of the easy parts about it too. I hope this was useful if you're learning English and maybe thinking about what makes English difficult while you're listening to the Japanese, or thinking that taking some pride that even though Japanese is a difficult language, you can speak it. I don't know. That's about it. Thanks for listening, and talk to you next time. Bye.